The twin girls knelt trembling on the cold, unforgiving ground, their tiny bodies shivering from more than just the chill in the air. The cruel stepmother's voice echoed harshly through the empty courtyard, her words cutting like daggers. "You are no longer my children," she sneered, her eyes filled with hatred. "You are worthless, unwanted. Leave this place and never return." Without mercy, she shoved them aside, their small frames stumbling as they were cast out into the darkness. They clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces, their sobs echoing in the silent night. "Please," one of the girls gasped, voice trembling with desperation. "Don't send us away. We're hungry. We're cold. We have nowhere to go." But the stepmother's footsteps faded into the distance, her silhouette vanishing into the shadows. The girls were left alone, abandoned in a world that seemed vast and merciless. The cold seeped into their bones as they fell to their knees, clutching their stomachs in pain. Their tiny hands shook as they begged for mercy, eyes wide with fear and longing. "We just want to be loved," one whispered, voice cracking. "Please, someone, help us." But no one answered. Only the deafening silence and the ghostly whisper of the wind remained. Starvation gnawed at their bellies, their bodies weak and trembling. They searched desperately for something, an abandoned crumb, a drop of water, anything to quell the gnawing hunger. Their little feet stumbled over debris, their cries growing louder, more frantic. "Mama! Papa!" they cried out, calling for the only family they knew, but the night offered no reply. Punishment came swiftly. In their frailty, they fell into a muddy ditch, their clothes torn and dirt smudged across their faces. The stepmother's words echoed in their minds. "You are cursed. You are nothing." The girls looked at each other with despair, their small shoulders heavy with grief. The darkness seemed to swallow them whole, a terrifying abyss that threatened to drown their hopes. As hours passed, shadows lengthened and the cold pressed harder against their fragile bodies. Their voices grew weaker, their cries fading into whispers of despair. They huddled together, trembling, their eyes fluttering shut in exhaustion and hopelessness. It felt as if the world had abandoned them entirely, leaving only pain and darkness. Suddenly, a light pierced through the gloom, a gentle, radiant glow that seemed to shimmer with love and hope. The girls blinked awake, their tear-streaked faces lifted towards the luminous presence. In that moment, the air grew softer, warmer. A figure emerged from the glow, tall, gentle, and filled with compassion. It was Jesus. He knelt beside them, his eyes full of tenderness and understanding. His voice was calm and reassuring. "Come to me, little ones," he said softly. "You are not forgotten. I see your suffering, and I am here to bring you hope." As his hands gently lifted them, the darkness receded, replaced by a warmth that seeped into their hearts and souls. The twin girls looked into his eyes, feeling a peace they had never known before. The pain that had consumed them was beginning to fade, replaced by a divine promise of love and restoration. They knew, somehow, that this was just the beginning of something greater, a miracle about to unfold. And so, in the midst of their deepest despair, a new dawn was breaking. The greatest hope was about to shine through the shadows, illuminating their path to healing, to salvation, to a future they could only dream of. The darkness had almost swallowed them whole, but now, they saw the faint glimmer of a new beginning, one founded on divine mercy and unfailing love. The twin girls had known hardship from the moment they were born into a world that seemed cold and unkind. Their mother had passed away when they were just infants, leaving them with a gentle, loving grandmother who cherished them deeply. But that happiness was short-lived. When the grandmother grew too old to care for them, the stepmother, a woman whose heart was hardened by greed and bitterness, took the girls into her home with false promises of care and love. Instead, she saw them as nothing more than burdens, symbols of her husband's past, reminders of what she could never have. Their stepfather, a man distant and distracted, rarely paid attention to them. His mind was preoccupied with work, his own ambitions, or the cold silence that filled their household. He was often absent, leaving the stepmother alone with her growing resentment. She saw the girls as inconvenient, shabby reminders of the life she wanted to forget. She dressed them poorly, kept them hungry, and ignored their tears. Their innocence was met with disdain, a nuisance to be tolerated, not loved. As they grew, the girls longed for affection, for a glimpse of kindness in the harshness of their daily existence. But the stepmother's cruelty deepened. She scolded them for tiny mistakes, blamed them for misfortunes beyond their control, and punished them with neglect. They were left cold and hungry for hours, their small bodies trembling as they huddled in corners, clutching each other for comfort. Their clothes were tattered, their shoes worn through, and their faces often streaked with dirt and tears. The day of the wedding was supposed to be a celebration, a new beginning for the family. Instead, it became the moment that sealed their suffering. The stepmother's eyes gleamed with malice as she decided to rid herself of the girls once and for all. After the ceremony, she summoned them with a cold, dismissive tone. "You are no longer my children," she announced cruelly, her voice dripping with contempt. "You are worthless. You've brought nothing but shame. Leave this house and never come back." Without a shred of compassion, she pushed them aside, her words echoing like a final blow. The girls, trembling and sobbing, clung to each other as they were cast out into the darkness. Their small frames shivered from the cold, their stomachs aching with hunger. Their hearts ached with confusion and despair. How could someone who once pretended to care so easily turn away? How could their own family abandon them so cruelly? Their cries for mercy, for love, went unheard as they stumbled down the deserted street, alone and forsaken. Their stepfather, who had been silent during the ordeal, merely watched from a distance, his face unreadable. Perhaps he felt a pang of guilt or shame, but he said nothing, leaving the girls to face the night alone. The stepmother's figure disappeared behind the closed door of the house, her footsteps echoing her final rejection. The girls' tiny bodies curled in the cold alley, their tears falling freely as starvation and exhaustion overwhelmed them. They begged for someone to help, their voices cracking with helplessness. "Please, don't leave us here. We're so hungry. We just want to be loved." They searched desperately for scraps of food, for a moment of warmth, anything that could ease their suffering. Their clothes were torn, their cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. They tried to call out for their parents, their voices hoarse and trembling. "Mama, Papa, where are you?" they whispered, desperation clouding their young faces. But no one answered. Only the wind carried their cries away into the darkness. Punishment came swiftly. In their fragile state, they fell into a muddy ditch, their small bodies sinking into the cold, choking mud. The stepmother's words haunted them. "You are cursed. You are nothing." The words pierced their hearts, filling their minds with shame and despair. They looked at each other with hopeless eyes, their innocence battered by injustice and neglect. Their dreams of love and safety had been shattered, replaced by cold reality and pain. Hours passed, and the night grew darker and colder. The girls' cries faded into soft whispers of despair, their tiny bodies trembling with exhaustion. They huddled together, feeling utterly abandoned, the weight of injustice crushing their spirits. It seemed as though the world had turned its back on them completely, leaving only shadows and suffering. Their little hearts, once full of hope, now struggled to hold on to any remnants of faith. Just as their hope was slipping away, a gentle, luminous light pierced through the darkness, warm, soft, and full of love. The glow grew brighter and brighter, illuminating the bleakness around them. From within that radiant light, a figure stepped forward, calm, kind, and filled with compassion. It was Jesus. He knelt beside them, his eyes full of tenderness and understanding. His voice, soothing and gentle, broke through the silence. "Come to me, little ones. You are not forgotten. I see your suffering, and I am here to bring you hope." In that moment, everything changed. The darkness began to recede as his divine presence surrounded them, filling their hearts with peace. The cold and hunger no longer seemed to matter. As his hands lifted them gently, the pain and injustice that had haunted them drifted away, replaced by a divine promise of love and salvation. The girls looked into his eyes, feeling a warmth that burned brighter than any pain they had endured. They knew, somehow, that this was the beginning of something greater, a miracle, a new hope, a divine intervention that would restore what they had lost and heal what was broken. And so, amid their deepest despair, a new dawn was rising, one filled with promise, mercy, and a love that could never be taken away. The darkness had almost swallowed them whole, but now, they saw the faint glimmer of a brighter future, one built on divine grace and unwavering hope. The twin girls huddled in the shadows of the cold, empty yard, their small bodies trembling as the cruel stepmother's voice rang out with venom. "Get out!" she spat, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You are nothing but a stain on this family. Leave now and never come back." Without a moment's hesitation, she grabbed their tiny arms and roughly shoved them away, their bodies stumbling over uneven stones as they fell to the ground. Their hearts pounded in terror, their tears mixing with dirt as they clung to each other, helpless and broken. They had no choice but to crawl away, their bare feet bleeding from the rough ground, their tiny fists clenched in fear. Days earlier, the girls had tried to ask for food, their stomachs aching with hunger. Their stepmother had sneered at them, denying every plea. "You are not hungry," she snapped, tossing them an old crust of bread that was stale and moldy. "Eat that and be grateful. I have no time for starving children." The girls had looked at each other desperately, their hopes dashed. Their little hands trembled as they tried to nibble on the crumb, but it was so hard and bitter it made them cough. Every time they begged again, she insulted them, calling them lazy, ungrateful, and worse, worthless. Later that day, the stepmother's anger exploded again. She dragged them into the house, her face contorted with fury. "You're disgusting," she yelled, grabbing a worn switch from the wall. She struck them hard across their backs, tears streaming down their faces as pain shot through their tiny bodies. "Maybe that will teach you to behave like proper children." The girls screamed and begged for mercy, their voices trembling with fear, but she only laughed coldly, her voice echoing like a thunderclap that drowned out their cries. As the days passed, the abuse grew worse. The stepmother's favoritism was clear. She showered her own children with food, warmth, and kindness, while the twins were left freezing outside in the bitter wind. One night, they were thrown out of the house altogether, their clothes soaked from rain and dirt. The stepmother's words still haunted them. "You are cursed. You are nothing but trouble. I don't want to see your faces again." She slammed the door behind them, leaving them stranded in the darkness, shivering and starving, with nowhere to go. Their tiny bodies curled up on the cold ground, clutching each other for warmth, tears flowing freely as they begged silently for help. But their suffering did not stop there. The next day, the stepmother returned, her face twisted with disdain. She spat at them, calling them dirty little rats, and kicked dirt into their faces. "You're not fit to live," she sneered. "Why don't you just disappear?" She pushed them aside again and again, each shove more brutal than the last. Their fragile bodies could barely withstand her blows, and their hearts broke with every insult. They were denied shelter, food, and kindness, left to rot in the cold, abandoned by everyone they trusted. One evening, as they wandered helplessly through a deserted alley, the stepmother's voice echoed in their minds, an unending chorus of rejection, humiliation, and pain. Their small hands were raw from clutching at scraps of trash, their stomachs aching so fiercely they thought they might faint. Their clothes were torn, their faces smudged with dirt and tears. Every step they took felt heavier, each moment worse than the last. They called out for their parents, their voices hoarse and trembling. "Mama! Papa! Please help us!" But only the silence of the night answered back. No one came to save them. They were left utterly forsaken. And then, just when it seemed the suffering could not get any worse, a shadow fell over them. The darkness thickened, and from that darkness, a warm, glowing light emerged. It was gentle at first, then grew brighter, filling the entire space with divine radiance. The light moved closer, and from it, a figure stepped forward, tall, calming, filled with compassion. It was Jesus. His eyes shone with love and understanding, and his voice was soft but powerful enough to reach their broken hearts. "Come to me, little ones," he said softly. "You are not forgotten. I see your suffering, and I am here to bring you hope." In that moment, the pain that had seemed endless suddenly felt lighter, the despair lifting as divine mercy enveloped them. The children looked into his eyes, feeling their wounds begin to heal, their tears turn to peace. The relentless cruelty, the rejection, the pain, they all faded as his loving presence surrounded them. The darkness receded, and a new hope blossomed. They knew, somehow, that they were safe now, that a greater love had come to save them from the depths of their suffering and lead them toward light and salvation. The twin girls collapsed onto the cold, muddy street, their tiny bodies trembling uncontrollably. The rain had soaked them through, and their ragged clothes clung to their shivering frames. Their cheeks were streaked with dirt and tears, their faces pale and gaunt from days without enough food. Hunger gnawed fiercely at their stomachs, twisting them into knots of pain, but no one was there to hear their cries. Their voices, once trembling with hope, had faded into faint whispers of despair. Their small hands clutched at each other desperately, as if holding on to a fragile hope that someone would see their suffering and come to save them. But the silent street stretched on endlessly, empty and cold, offering no comfort, no warmth, only the echo of their broken cries. "Please, please," one of the girls choked out, voice trembling and cracking. Her eyes searched the darkness desperately, longing for someone, anyone, to come. Her stomach clenched painfully, her body weak from starvation, yet she couldn't even muster the strength to stand. Her sister's trembling hand reached out to her, but even that seemed so fragile now, as if the weight of their pain was too great to bear. The cold wind cut through their thin clothes, making their shivering worse. Their teeth chattered loudly as tears continued to stream down their dirt-streaked faces. They had been pushed out of their home in the cruelest way, by the stepmother's harsh words, her fists, her rejection. "You're worthless," she had sneered, tossing them aside like trash. "You're nothing but trouble. Get out of my sight and don't come back." The words haunted them, echoing in their minds as they had been cast into the darkness, left to wander the streets with no shelter, no food, no hope. The stepmother's footsteps had faded into the distance, leaving them abandoned and forgotten. Their tiny bodies had been kicked, slapped, insulted, each blow more brutal than the last. They had begged for mercy, for kindness, for some sign that someone cared. But only silence answered. Now, exhausted beyond measure, their strength was failing. Their eyelids fluttered as their bodies finally gave in to the overwhelming fatigue, their heads sinking onto the cold ground. Their trembling breaths grew shallow, and their small hands fell limply to their sides. The world around them blurred into darkness as their cries faded into silence, the pain and hopelessness pressing down on them like an unbreakable weight. The street remained silent, the darkness swallowing their tiny forms. The question lingered in the air, is no one going to help? As the cold wind howled through deserted alleys, the children's faces, once full of innocence and hope, now looked hollow and broken. Their eyelids fluttered closed, their bodies still, as if surrendering to the cold embrace of death. The hunger, the cold, the abuse. They had endured everything, and now it seemed that no rescue was coming. Their silent pleas had been drowned out by the indifferent silence of the night, leaving them utterly alone in their suffering. The pain was so intense, so overwhelming, that it felt as if the darkness would swallow them completely. The faint flicker of life was slipping away, replaced by an eerie quiet. Their little hearts struggled to beat, their fragile bodies too weak to resist the cold and hunger. Their faces, once bright with innocence, now reflected only despair. So helpless, so abandoned. For a moment it seemed like this was the end, a final, tragic surrender to the injustice of the world. Their tears dried on their dirt-streaked cheeks, their tiny hands limp and useless. The streets stretched on, silent and unmerciful, as if mocking their helplessness. And just as the darkness threatened to claim them forever, a gentle, luminous glow suddenly filled the entire space, soft, warm, and radiant. It was as if the heavens had opened and sent down a divine light to pierce through the despair, to reach into the depths of their suffering. The glow grew brighter, brighter still, until it illuminated the entire street and bathed the girls in a soothing, divine radiance. From that glow, a figure stepped forward, tall, kind, filled with compassion and love. It was Jesus. His eyes, full of tenderness and understanding, looked down at the fragile children lying helpless on the ground. His voice, gentle yet powerful, broke through the silence. "Come to me, little ones. You are not forgotten. I see your pain, and I am here to save you." The darkness receded, replaced by his divine presence. The pain, the hunger, the cold, they all began to fade, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace and hope. The children, trembling and exhausted, looked into his eyes, feeling a warmth that melted away every ache and every ounce of despair. The moment of their greatest suffering was about to turn into a divine miracle, one that would change everything. The twins lay motionless on the cold, muddy ground, their small bodies trembling from the relentless cold and hunger. Their clothes, torn and soaked, clung to them like a shroud of despair. Their cheeks were streaked with dirt and tears, their tiny hands clutching each other tightly, as if seeking comfort in the chaos surrounding them. The darkness pressed in from all sides, swallowing what little hope they had left, and silence reigned over the empty street. One girl, the younger, her face streaked with dirt and tears, slowly turned her head to look up at the bleak, starless sky. Her eyes, wide and hollow, reflected a deep, aching helplessness. Her breath was shallow, each inhale shallow and weak, as if the very air had been drained from her lungs. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, only a faint, trembling whisper that escaped her lips like a fragile prayer. Her trembling hands moved instinctively to her chest, as if trying to hold together the fractured pieces of her heart. Quietly, she whispered a prayer, her voice barely audible against the silence of the night. "Please, Lord, if you hear me, I'm here. We're here. Please help us." Her words were almost lost in the darkness, but her voice carried a weight of desperation that could be felt in every trembling syllable. She closed her eyes, tears continuing to stream down her dirt-streaked face, her silent plea hanging in the cold air. In that moment, everything seemed to freeze. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath. The wind ceased to whisper, the rain paused its relentless drumming, and the stars, if there had been any, seemed to hide behind the clouds. There was only her voice, her prayer, a fragile cry into the vast emptiness, asking for mercy, for hope, for salvation. Her small frame shivered uncontrollably, and her eyes remained fixed on the darkened sky, searching for a sign, a glimmer of light, anything that could break the suffocating despair. The silence stretched on, thick and oppressive, as if the very fabric of time had stopped. Her trembling hands clasped tightly over her chest, anchoring her in a moment of utter surrender. Her head bowed slightly, tears continuing to fall silently, her body exhausted and broken. It felt as if the darkness was about to swallow her whole, as if everything was about to end, her suffering, her hope, her very existence. Her quiet prayer echoed in the emptiness, a whisper lost to the void. She felt so small, so powerless, so abandoned. In her heart, she wondered if anyone could hear her, if anyone cared. Her trembling lips formed the words again, softly, almost inaudibly, "Please, please." It was a plea not just for herself, but for her sister, for their faded innocence, for the love they had lost. Her entire being seemed to surrender to the night, to the darkness that threatened to consume her. The stillness was almost unbearable, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Her eyes remained fixed on the sky, her silent tears falling into the mud, her prayer lingering in the air like a fragile, flickering flame about to die out. Her body was weak, her spirit almost broken, yet her heart clung to that tiny hope, an ember, faint but still burning. And then, in that stillness, a divine presence seemed to emerge from the shadows, an unspoken promise of salvation. But before that miracle arrived, everything seemed to pause. An eternal moment of anticipation, a breath held in the universe's chest, as if the very fabric of hope was about to be woven anew. The girl, eyes still gazing upward, remained silent, surrendered to the night and to her prayer, waiting for the divine response that would change everything. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that presses down on the soul and makes every sound feel distant and unreachable. The twin girls, exhausted and broken, lay trembling on the muddy street, their small bodies shivering from cold and hunger. Their tears had long since dried on their dirt-streaked faces, leaving trails of despair that no longer seemed to matter. The darkness seemed to swallow everything, hope, warmth, life, except for the faint whisper of their silent prayers, pleading for mercy, for rescue, for anything to break the endless cycle of suffering. The stars, if they had been visible, had vanished behind thick clouds, leaving only the oppressive gloom. In that moment, everything seemed lost. They had been cast out by cruelty, abandoned to face the cold, the hunger, the darkness alone. Their tiny hands clutched at each other, their breaths shallow, their spirits nearly broken. It was as if the world had turned its back on them, leaving only despair in its wake. And just as the darkness threatened to swallow them forever, an unanticipated miracle began to unfold. From the shadows, a gentle glow appeared, soft, radiant, like the first light of dawn breaking through the night. It was subtle at first, a flicker of warmth that seemed to grow with each passing second. The glow spread across the street, illuminating everything in a divine, peaceful light that seemed to breathe life into the darkness. The cold wind stilled, as if nature itself paused to witness this extraordinary moment. The air felt lighter, filled with an unspoken promise of hope and salvation. And then, from the luminous glow, a figure stepped forward, tall, calm, filled with compassion and love. It was Jesus. His presence was gentle yet powerful, radiating peace that calmed even the restless night. His eyes, full of tenderness and understanding, looked down at the fragile children lying helpless on the ground. The divine light seemed to surround him, wrapping everything in a warm embrace, as if shielding them from the cold despair that had threatened to consume their spirits. His voice, soft but unwavering, broke through the silence, echoing like a soothing melody. "Come to me, little ones. Do not be afraid. I am here." The girls, trembling and exhausted, turned their weary eyes toward him. Their silent tears slowed, and a fragile hope flickered in their hearts for the first time in what felt like forever. As he knelt beside them, his hands gently lifted their small bodies, offering comfort more profound than words could ever express. His touch was tender, full of mercy and love, as if he knew their pain intimately. The divine presence radiated calm and reassurance, washing over them like a gentle wave of warmth and peace. In that instant, The darkness that had enveloped their lives began to recede, replaced by his divine light. The relief was overwhelming, an emotional wave that swept through their trembling bodies. The girls looked up at him, eyes wide with wonder and gratitude, feeling as if their suffering had finally found an answer. His embrace seemed to say, "You are not alone. I see your tears, your pain, your silent prayers, and I have come to bring you hope." The divine peace that flooded the scene was palpable. It touched the deepest parts of their broken hearts and mended what was shattered. The pain, hunger, cold, everything that had haunted them, began to fade into the background as they rested in his presence. The divine figure of Jesus, arriving at exactly the moment when no one expected, was a beacon of hope amid despair. His arrival was a divine intervention, a testament that even in the darkest moments, light and love can pierce through the gloom. The girls' trembling bodies relaxed, and their tears of despair transformed into tears of relief and awe. No longer were they alone in their suffering. No longer was hope a distant dream. Now, they had a new beginning, an embrace of divine mercy that promised healing, comfort, and restoration. In that sacred moment, everything changed. The night was no longer an ending but a turning point, a divine promise that love and hope would always find a way. And as the divine light shone brighter, illuminating their faces with a gentle glow, the children knew deep in their hearts that their lives would never be the same again. Their suffering had been met with divine compassion, and their tears had been answered with love beyond measure. The divine presence of Jesus had arrived, an unexpected miracle that transformed despair into hope, darkness into light, and brokenness into new life. The divine light of Jesus continued to shine softly, enveloping the twins in a warm, healing glow. The cold darkness that had so cruelly pressed in was gradually pushed back by his presence, and in that sacred moment, everything began to shift. The girls, trembling and exhausted, felt a surge of strength flowing into their tiny bodies, a gentle but undeniable force that lifted their spirits from the depths of despair. Their eyes, once hollow and filled with hopelessness, now sparkled with a fragile glimmer of hope, as if a new life had been breathed into them. It was as if his arrival had awakened a dormant power within their hearts, an unshakable confidence that they were not forgotten, that they mattered, that love and mercy still existed in the world. The pain and hunger that had haunted them seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a profound sense of safety and divine protection. The girls looked at one another, their trembling hands gripping tightly, as if to anchor themselves in this newfound hope. Their small faces, streaked with dirt and tears, now carried a quiet, resilient strength, an unspoken declaration that they would not be defeated by cruelty, that love had entered their lives in the form of this divine presence. As Jesus gently knelt beside them, his eyes filled with compassion, he reached out his hand and softly touched each girl's shoulder. That touch conveyed more than words could ever express: comfort, reassurance, and a promise of unwavering protection. The girls felt an immediate calm washing over their hearts, as if his presence was a shield against the darkness that had tried to drown them. In that moment, something powerful was happening, not just within the children, but also in the atmosphere around them. The cruel adults who had cast them out, the stepmother and others who had inflicted pain and shame, stood nearby, stunned into silence. Their faces, once full of contempt and cruelty, now showed shock, some with wide eyes, others with trembling lips. They had thought they had the power to break these children, to cast them aside and forget their suffering. But now, in the presence of divine mercy, their arrogance seemed to crumble. The stepmother's face, once twisted with anger and disdain, paled as she watched Jesus kneel beside the girls. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her jaw tightening as she realized that everything she had done was being overshadowed by this divine intervention. The others who had mocked and rejected the children looked on in stunned silence, their hearts suddenly heavy with shame. For the first time, they saw the children not as worthless burdens, but as precious souls cherished by God himself. The realization sank deep into their minds. Their cruelty, their dismissiveness, had been in vain. They had tried to silence innocence, to crush hope, but divine love had arrived to restore what was broken. The shame on their faces was undeniable. They were silenced by the overwhelming presence of mercy and compassion. No words were spoken, but their expressions told a story of regret and awakening. The children, meanwhile, felt the shift within themselves. Their trembling legs grew steadier, their spirits stronger. They knew that, despite everything, they were protected now. Their suffering had not been in vain. It had led them to this moment of divine intervention. Jesus' presence proved that even the darkest pain could be transformed into hope, and that love could prevail over cruelty. The divine light continued to surround them, illuminating the path to a new beginning. The children's hearts swelled with gratitude and awe. Every tear, every moment of despair now turned into a testament of divine mercy. They knew, deep in their souls, that they were no longer alone. Their suffering had been met with love that healed and restored, and the shame faced by the adults was evidence that even the most hardened hearts could be touched and changed by divine grace. The moment marked a turning point, not just for the children, but for everyone present. It was proof that mercy and compassion can silence even the cruelest voices, that hope can rise from the depths of despair, and that divine love can truly transform lives. The divine presence of Jesus had arrived, and nothing would be the same again. As Jesus gently withdrew his presence, the divine light that had surrounded the girls began to fade softly, leaving behind a warm, comforting glow that seemed to settle over them like a protective shield. The twins, once trembling with fear and cold, now sat quietly, their small bodies relaxed and their eyes shining with a new sense of peace. The darkness that had threatened to swallow them whole was replaced by a calm that filled their hearts with hope. Their faces, streaked with tears, reflected a gentle serenity, like dawn breaking after a long, stormy night. The pain and hunger they had carried seemed lighter now, as if the divine love had lifted their burdens and restored their spirits. They looked around, noticing the quiet, awestruck faces of those who had once cast them out, and saw the shame that clouded their expressions. The cruel stepmother, her arrogance shattered, looked on in silence, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and regret. The others who had jeered and dismissed the girls now seemed to stand frozen, as if awakening from a dark dream. In that moment, the twins felt a profound sense of safety, an unshakable assurance that they were now held in the care of something greater than any cruelty they had endured. Their tiny hands clasped together, a silent prayer of gratitude filling their hearts. They knew that what they had experienced was not just a fleeting miracle, but a symbol of divine love that never abandons, no matter how dark the circumstances. Jesus had shown them that even in the depths of despair, hope could be reborn, that love could transform pain into peace, fear into courage. As they sat quietly, a gentle breeze seemed to whisper through the air, carrying with it a message of love and hope. It was as if Jesus' words echoed softly in their hearts. You are loved beyond measure. No matter how dark your path may seem, my light is always with you. Trust in my love, and you will find strength even in the hardest moments. The girls looked up, their faces lit with a renewed sense of trust and calm. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they felt a divine assurance that they were not alone, that God's love was with them, guiding and protecting. They were safe now, restored by his mercy, their spirits shining brighter than ever before. The scene shifted subtly, showing the children in a quiet, peaceful place, perhaps a safe home or a sanctuary, where they could heal and grow. Their small bodies no longer trembled with cold or fear. Instead, they sat peacefully, wrapped in warmth and love, their hearts open to the new beginning that awaited them. It was a moment of divine redemption, a reminder that love can conquer even the greatest pain and that hope is always present, waiting to be rediscovered. As the divine presence gently receded, a voice of reflection beckoned the audience. Do you recognize Jesus in your darkest moments? Are you willing to believe that His love is always near, even when you feel most alone? Can you open your heart to His hope and let His light guide you through your struggles? Sometimes, in the silence of our most difficult times, His presence is quietly waiting to restore us, to remind us that we are loved beyond measure. The story of these twin girls invites each of us to ask ourselves, where do I need to accept divine love in my life? Do I trust that hope can be reborn from pain? And am I willing to see the light of Jesus shining through my darkest hours? Because in recognizing His presence, in embracing His love, we can find the strength to heal, to forgive, and to move forward, forever changed by the divine mercy that never leaves us alone.